I'm Rosalie Greer, 32, and I built a solid life from nothing, worked 2 jobs, paid off student loans, and never asked anyone for help. For years, I supported my dad's second marriage, even when his new wife barely acknowledged me. But when she pawned his military medals, his Purple Heart, for bingo money after he died, I made a decision that changed everything. Ever been betrayed by someone you gave everything to? Drop your story in the comments. You're not the only one. Before we get into it, let me know where you're watching from, and if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when no one else would. Hit like and subscribe for more real stories about drawing the line and taking your power back. Because what happened next caught everyone off guard. I don't remember the first time I understood what my father did for a living. I just remember the weight of his uniform, the way the medals on his chest seemed to glint like they carried a story of their own. He was an army medic, deployed 3 times, twice to Iraq, once to Afghanistan. He didn't talk much about it except to say, "I patched people up, that's all." But I knew it was more than that. A few of his friends didn't come home. He came back with a Purple Heart and damage to his spine that made rainy days tough, and some nights even tougher. After my mother died cancer when I was 12, it was just the 2 of us. He wasn't the warm and fuzzy type, but he was steady. We had a rhythm. I handled the dishes, he handled the bills. On weekends, we'd watch movies, mostly war dramas, which I didn't love but sat through anyway because they reminded him of people I'd never meet. He didn't cry, but sometimes his jaw would tighten, and I knew he was remembering something hard. I'd quietly switch off the lamp when the credits rolled. Neither of us would say much afterward. He didn't date while I was in high school, said he didn't want to confuse things for me, which I appreciated. I didn't feel like I was missing a mother figure, not really. We had a few rough patches, especially when I started pushing for more independence, but he was fair. I always felt like we were a team. He never missed a school meeting, and when I made honor roll junior year, he framed the certificate like it was a war medal. "You worked for this," he said, tapping the frame. "I'm proud of you." By the time I went to college, he was still living in the same little house in South Carolina where I'd grown up. I visited as often as I could, usually during long weekends or holidays. He'd make his chili, the only thing he ever really cooked, and we'd talk about classes, professors, whatever drama was going on in my dorm. I didn't realize how much I leaned on those visits until they started to change. He met Linda 2 years after I left for college. I remember the first time he told me about her. It was during one of our Sunday night calls. I could hear the hesitance in his voice. "She's nice," he said. "We met at the VFW pancake breakfast. She volunteers with the bingo crowd." I tried not to react. "That's great, Dad." "Yeah," he said, clearing his throat. "She's easy to talk to." He didn't say much more that night, but over the next few months, Linda became a fixture. First it was, Linda stopped by with banana bread, and then it was, Linda came with me to the doctor, and eventually, Linda's moving in. I won't pretend I wasn't caught off guard, but I told myself he deserved someone. After everything he'd been through, what he'd lost, what he'd given, he deserved companionship. I met her the Thanksgiving before my final year of undergrad. She was polite in a surface-level kind of way. She wore a heavy perfume and called me honey, even though we'd only just met. When I brought a bottle of wine and a bouquet, she acted surprised. "Oh, how thoughtful," she said, like it hadn't occurred to her that I might be raised with manners. My dad seemed happy, though. Lighter somehow, he cracked more jokes than usual. I figured if she was good for him, I could make it work. I kept trying. That Christmas, I sent them a gift card for a weekend getaway in Asheville. The year after that, I mailed a framed photo of Dad and me from my high school graduation. Linda never mentioned it. I asked once if they'd gone on the trip, and she said, "We were busy. You know how it is." The tone made it clear I was prying. Still, I made the effort. I paid for their 5th anniversary dinner, made the reservation, called ahead to arrange a special dessert. When I asked later how it went, Linda said, "Fine, but the waiter forgot the side salad." No thank you, no acknowledgement of the gesture, just a complaint. Even when I started working full-time, juggling long hours and deadlines, I tried to visit during the holidays. Sometimes I'd bring my laptop and work from the guest room. Linda would make pointed comments about always being on a screen, even though I was doing my best to be present. I never snapped back. I didn't want to make things harder for my dad. Once she sent me a Christmas card addressed to Amanda, which isn't even close to my name. When I brought it up, gently, she laughed it off. You kids all have such similar names these days. I let it go because that's what I did over and over. Let it go for him. When Dad's back started giving him more trouble, I offered to help coordinate a new VA appointment. Linda said she was handling it. A week later, he ended up in the ER because he'd tried to stretch out his old pain meds and pulled something reaching for a cereal box. I was furious. She brushed it off. He's stubborn, she said. He doesn't tell me everything. But I knew better. I knew how my dad handled pain. I knew how he downplayed discomfort until it became dangerous. Someone who lived with him, who claimed to love him, should have known that too. But every time I raised a concern, Linda found a way to make me feel like I was overstepping. After that, I started calling him more frequently, just to check in. I could tell when he was tired, when the pain was flaring up. "I'm fine," he'd say, and then change the subject. He always changed the subject. When he passed, it wasn't entirely unexpected, but it still caught me off guard. I had just landed from a work trip when the hospital called. Complications from a slipped disc surgery. The kind of risk they warn you about but say, unlikely. He never woke up. Linda handled the arrangements. She didn't ask for my input. She chose cremation, no military service. No taps, no flag, no honor guard. When I asked why, she said, he wouldn't have wanted the drama. I didn't argue, not then. I was too stunned, too numb. I went back to my hotel room that night and cried into a towel because there was no one else to cry to. No one who really knew what he meant to me. She didn't mention his medals, or the photo albums, or the letters he kept from his deployments. I figured we'd go through everything together later. That's what people do, right? They sort, they remember, they grieve. Except by the time I came back a few weeks later to help clear out his things, it was all gone. The box with his Purple Heart, Bronze Star, and service ribbons. The photo of him shaking hands with General Kruger. The shadow box I'd made him in high school. Gone. When I asked where everything was, Linda said, I donated what I could. The rest was just clutter. You don't need trauma souvenirs hanging over you. I didn't react the way she expected. I didn't yell. I just stood there, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Something in me knew without proof, that this wasn't just a story about cleaning house, but I didn't press it. Not then. Not yet. The funeral was quiet. Quieter than it should have been. No uniformed honor guard, no flag presentation, no taps, just a short service in a chapel that smelled like lavender air freshener and someone else's grief. I offered to coordinate something through the VA, just a small recognition of his service, but Linda shut that down immediately. He hated attention, she said, smoothing her blouse like she was already over it. Besides, he wouldn't have wanted all that fuss. I wanted to argue. I wanted to say it wasn't about fuss. It was about dignity. About honoring a man who spent over a decade risking his life in war zones, stitching strangers back together while his own body broke down. But I didn't push. Maybe I should have. I told myself she was overwhelmed. That grief shows up differently for everyone. I thought if I gave her space, she'd come around. She didn't. At the reception afterward, Linda barely spoke to me. She stood near the kitchen, letting neighbors and church acquaintances circle her like she was the grieving widow of a local celebrity. I caught snippets of her voice between sips of coffee and whispers of condolences. It was so sudden, we were just watching Jeopardy the night before. She sounded tired, performatively tired, but not broken, not how I expected her to be. When it was my turn to say goodbye to the guests, people who had known me since I was little, she was already gone. A neighbor told me she'd left early because the noise was giving her a migraine. I stayed behind, helping clean up the leftover sandwiches and folding chairs. Someone had left a vase of lilies on the counter. Dad hated lilies, said they smelled like hospitals. I threw them in the trash. A few weeks later, I returned to help sort through his things. I called ahead, asked if there was a good time. She sounded distracted. Sure, whenever, she said, but there's not much left to go through. I've been cleaning. When I arrived, she was wearing leggings and one of Dad's old sweatshirts, sleeves pushed up, cigarette in one hand. The house smelled like bleach and stale fabric softener. I made a beeline for his study, the small room off the hallway where he kept his service records, old photo albums, and the bookshelf we built together when I was 13. It was empty. Not cleared out in a respectful, boxed-up way. Empty, shelves bare, desk gone, walls freshly painted. A folding table had been set up with a jigsaw puzzle in progress and a bingo calendar stuck to the wall with masking tape. "Where's all his stuff?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Linda didn't look up from the puzzle. "I gave most of it away, vets groups and donation centers. Some of it was too worn out to keep." "What about the medals, the uniforms, his shadow box?" She shrugged. "Clutter, you don't need all that trauma sitting in your house. I figured it was better to let it go." Better to let it go. As if his life was a garage sale and she'd cleared out the junk drawer. I didn't say what I was thinking. I didn't ask why she hadn't called me, hadn't given me a chance to go through anything before erasing the last physical remnants of him. I just nodded once and told her I'd stay the night. That evening, I wandered through the house, looking for some piece of him she might have missed. A book with his handwriting, one of his army caps, the old photograph of him and me standing in front of the base clinic on Bring Your Kid to Work Day. Nothing. The house was scrubbed clean of him. I opened a kitchen cabinet and found 3 unopened jars of instant coffee, the cheap kind he used to drink even though I begged him to switch to real grounds. I took one, quietly, and slipped it into my overnight bag. It was the only thing I could find that still had his fingerprints on it. The next morning, Linda was in a noticeably lighter mood. She made toast and asked if I wanted to drive her to the bingo hall later that afternoon. I said no. She pouted a little, then shrugged. I hadn't known she was into bingo. Not like this. Not to the point where she had a personalized dauber set and a zippered vinyl bag filled with game sheets. I watched from the window as she climbed into her car, lipstick freshly applied, hair sprayed stiff, like it was date night. She drove off with the radio on and a scarf flapping from the passenger seat headrest. Over the next few months, I noticed it becoming a pattern. Every time I called, she was either at bingo, on her way to bingo, or just getting back. "It keeps my mind occupied," she told me once. "Plus, I've been pretty lucky lately." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't want to know yet. The neighbors started mentioning it, too. One of them, an older woman named Marlene who used to walk her dog past our house every evening, called me out of the blue. Said she'd seen Linda wearing new jewelry. Driving to some place across town 3 or 4 nights a week. Said it was starting to look like a habit. I tried to downplay it. "She's probably just blowing off steam. It's been hard on her." Marlene paused. "That woman doesn't look hard hit, dear. She looks comfortable." The comment stuck with me. I flew down again in early spring to check on things. I offered to take her out to lunch. She insisted we go to a local buffet that offered a bingo discount on Tuesdays. She flashed a punch card at the cashier with a practiced flick of her wrist. "Almost to my free meal," she said, grinning. During lunch, she talked almost exclusively about her regular table and how the bingo caller had a crush on her. I asked casually if she'd ever found Dad's medals or if they'd turned up in one of the donation boxes. She waved her fork like she was swatting away a fly. "No idea. Probably all went in one of the church drives." "You didn't keep anything, not even the Purple Heart." She took a bite of mashed potatoes, then looked at me like I was being unreasonable. What would I want with that? It's not like I knew him when he earned it. It hit me then, she never saw him as a soldier. She saw him as a man who made her dinner, paid the bills, kept quiet. The whole part of him that came before her didn't count. It was like he had 2 separate lives, and she decided the first one didn't matter. On the way back, she asked me to stop by a pawn shop. "I need to pick up a bracelet I had cleaned," she said. The place was small, cluttered, filled with mismatched shelving and fluorescent lights that buzzed. While she talked to the man behind the counter, I wandered around. Looked at a shelf filled with military memorabilia, watches, pins, even an old dog tag display. I didn't see anything familiar, but something about the sight of it made my stomach twist. Back in the car, I asked her if she ever donated anything to pawn shops. She laughed. "Of course not, I sell donations for suckers." That was the moment I knew. I didn't say anything, I didn't accuse her, but the knot in my stomach tightened. She de-sold it, all of it, not because she was desperate, not because she needed the money to survive, but because she wanted cash for a new bracelet, for a few more nights at the bingo table, for the thrill of it. That night, I opened my laptop and started searching local pawn shops. And what I found confirmed everything I didn't want to believe. I was staying with a friend for the weekend when I got the message. We were sitting on her balcony, sipping coffee, catching up on the kind of things you never really have time for: work updates, her new boyfriend, a half-planned trip to Montreal. My phone buzzed on the table and I almost ignored it. Just a local number with no name attached, but something made me pick it up. The message was from a woman I didn't know personally, but who must have remembered me from high school. Her name was Bridget, and the text was short. "Hey, saw this and thought of you. Isn't this your dad's?" Attached was a photo, taken clearly from a phone. A wooden shadow box behind glass, sitting on a dusty counter. Inside were 3 medals: a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, and a Good Conduct Medal. To the left was a small folded flag. To the right, a black and white photo of my father in uniform, younger than I'd ever seen him in real life. And above it all, the words "Veterans Memorabilia for Sale, Price to Move," stamped in bright red block font across the top of the frame. It was his. I recognized the exact arrangement. I was the one who helped him put it together 5 years earlier when I was home for the summer. He'd laid the medals out on the kitchen table with surgical precision, letting me place each one under the felt mat. "Just like that," he'd said, tapping the edge of the flag. "Clean lines, simple." He seemed proud of it, not showy, just resolved. And now it was sitting under fluorescent lights, next to used watches and half-broken DVD players. I didn't even finish my coffee. I told my friend I had to run an errand, got in my car, and drove straight to the shop. It was less than 20 minutes away from Linda's house. I knew the area. Dad used to joke that it was the only part of town where you could get your watch repaired and your car impounded on the same block. When I got there, the display was gone. I asked the guy behind the counter about the shadow box, the one posted on Facebook. He looked me up and down, then said, "It's on hold. Someone called about it this morning. Gonna come pick it up tomorrow." I asked who, but he shook his head. "Can't give out customer info." I left my name and number, said I'd match the price. He didn't respond, just scribbled it down like he was humoring me and turned back to the smudged glass counter. I sat in my car for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry yet, just hollow. By the time I got to Linda's, it was already evening. Her porch light was on, but the blinds were drawn. I rang the bell twice. She opened the door wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt that said "Bingo Queen" in glittery letters. "You're back early," she said, stepping aside. I didn't waste time. I pulled up the photo on my phone and held it out to her. "Did you sell this?" She looked at it for all of 3 seconds before shrugging. "Oh, that." She walked back toward the kitchen as if we were talking about expired milk. "Yeah, thought someone might want it. Figured better that than sitting in a box somewhere." I didn't follow her right away. I stayed in the hallway, staring at the spot on the wall where the shadow box had hung for years. It had been right above the bookshelf. Now, there was a canvas print of slot machines and playing cards in its place. "You didn't think to ask me." Linda opened the fridge, pulled out a soda, and cracked it open without looking at me. "What for? You live in a 1-bedroom apartment. You want to hang a war memorial over your breakfast table." They were his medals. She turned then, leaning on the counter, sipping casually like we were talking about a garage sale find. They were just collecting dust. He wasn't exactly parading them around. "You're making it a bigger deal than it is." I didn't yell, I didn't even answer. Something inside me had gone very still. My palms were damp, my throat dry, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of a fight. I just walked out. She didn't follow me, didn't ask where I was going or what I planned to do. The screen door creaked closed behind me, and that was it. I sat in my car for an hour, engine off, hands folded. The porch light flicked off at some point and the house went dark. All I could think about was how carefully my father had kept those medals. Not proudly, exactly, but with a kind of quiet reverence. They weren't trophies to him, they were reminders of people he couldn't save, of things he couldn't undo. Selling them, reducing them to a pawn shop price tag, wasn't just insensitive, it was obscene. She hadn't just given them away, she discarded them. For what? $50 and a bingo buy-in. I could hear her voice in my head. Better than them ending up in some box. But that's exactly where they should have been, in a box. A safe one, a respected one. Not priced to move. By the time I turned the key in the ignition, something had shifted. The grief I'd been nursing since Dad's death, quiet, manageable, dull, suddenly sharpened into something else. Not rage, not yet, but a sense of resolve. Linda had made her choices, and now so would I. I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly for a while, past darkened strip malls and gas stations, trying to calm down. I ended up in the parking lot of a closed grocery store, just sitting there with the radio off. My phone buzzed with a message from my best friend Erica, asking if I was back in town yet. I called her instead. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, everything okay?" I didn't even know where to begin. I just said, "She sold his metals." There was a pause then. "What do you mean?" I told her everything about the photo, the pawn shop, Linda's reaction. Erica listened without interrupting. She had known my dad well enough to know what those medals meant, not just in a patriotic sense, but to him personally. He never bragged about them, never displayed them to impress anyone. They weren't decorations. They were markers of survival. "I can't believe she did that," Erica said. "Actually, I can. That woman never respected him." "I keep trying to give her the benefit of the doubt," I said, "but I think I've hit my limit." There was a silence on the other end. Then she said it. "You should call the news." I actually laughed. "What, like a tip line? Report her like she's stolen copper pipes?" "I'm serious," she said. "Local stations eat this stuff up, decorated veterans' memory disrespected by next of kin. They'll pick it up, and it'll make her squirm." "It feels petty." "It's not petty, it's accountability." I didn't commit to anything, but the idea lingered. After we hung up, I just sat there, staring at the steering wheel, running through every moment I could remember from the past few years. Every time Linda had rolled her eyes when Dad switched to a history documentary. Every passive-aggressive comment she made when he stood during the national anthem, even when it hurt his back. "No one's watching," she used to mutter. "You're not being graded." I remembered the way she'd sighed when the VA sent another appointment reminder. "Can't they just leave you alone already?" She treated his service like an inconvenience, like it was some outdated habit he should have dropped the moment he married her. And for a while, he let her, or maybe he didn't know how to push back. But now I realized I had let her, too. I had watched her chip away at him one eye roll at a time, and I stayed quiet. I thought I was preserving the peace. What I was really doing was letting her rewrite who he was. Back at my apartment the next morning, I pulled out an old folder from the bookshelf. It had my dad's discharge papers, some photos, a few news clippings from when his unit came home. I found the copy of the citation for his Bronze Star, typed on government letterhead, with language that was as formal as it was devastating. I read it twice before I called the news station. The woman who answered sounded bored at first, but as soon as I mentioned Purple Heart, her tone shifted. She asked me to spell my name slowly and said a reporter might reach out. I didn't think they actually would. But the next morning, I got the call. A man named Daniel something, reporter for the local affiliate, said he was interested. He asked if I'd be willing to talk on camera. I said no at first. I didn't want to make it about me. But when he offered to just film the shadow box and tell the story without naming Linda, I reconsidered. I sent him the photo from the pawn shop and a few pictures of my dad, one in uniform, one of the two of us at my college graduation, and one where he was helping a neighbor fix her roof. Daniel called back later that day and said they were running it as a weekend feature. "People need to hear this," he said. "It's not just about the medals, it's about memory." The segment aired on a Sunday evening. I wasn't even watching live. Erica texted me, all caps, "You're on the news." I pulled it up online. The voiceover was calm, professional. The footage showed the pawn shop, a close-up of the listing, then a photo of my dad, smiling in uniform. The headline read, "Veteran's Purple Heart sold for $50, family seeks justice." They hadn't named Linda, but it didn't take long for people to connect the dots. Small town, shared last name, Facebook did the rest. By Monday morning, the station had posted the story online, and it was already getting traction. Comments poured in, mostly from veterans, their families, people who'd lost someone to war. They were angry. Righteously so. One woman wrote, "My husband never got to come home. If someone sold his medals for gas money, I'd lose my mind." Someone else commented, "This is why people stop trusting the next generation. No respect for sacrifice." Linda hadn't called, not yet, but I knew it was coming. I kept checking the pawn shop's page. The listing was gone. I drove back the next day, and the man behind the counter recognized me right away. He didn't smile. "We're not selling it," he said before I even asked. "Someone donated to cover it, said it should go back to the family." I asked who, but he didn't give a name. Just went into the back and came out holding the shadow box, carefully wrapped in butcher paper. "I don't want to be part of the circus," he said. "Take it." When I got back to my apartment, I unwrapped it slowly, like it might fall apart in my hands. The medals were still arranged exactly how we'd left them. The glass was smudged, the frame chipped on one corner. But it was his. I sat down on the floor with it in my lap and just stared. Not crying, not angry, just present. Later that night, Erica came over with takeout. We didn't talk much. She just looked at the box, then at me. "You did the right thing," she said. "I still feel weird about it," I admitted. She didn't try to talk me out of it. Just handed me a container of noodles and said, "That's okay. Sometimes justice feels weird." When Linda finally called the next morning, I didn't pick up. Her voicemail was short, no apology, just, "I hope you're happy. You made me look like a monster." I deleted it without listening to the end, not because I didn't care, but because I had finally understood something important. Silence wasn't always weakness. Sometimes it was a choice, a boundary. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to explain. I had already said everything I needed to. And this time, I'd said it loud enough for everyone to hear. After the first story aired, I told myself it was enough. The news segment had made its point, the medals were back in my possession, and Linda had to face the blowback, whether she wanted to or not. I hadn't named her. I hadn't said anything beyond the truth. I didn't think I needed to do more. But that feeling didn't last long. What started as a local feature took on a life of its own. A national veterans Facebook group picked it up, then a few independent blogs. Within days, it was on the front page of Reddit under the headline, "Stepmother sells decorated veterans medals for bingo money." That line wasn't mine, but I couldn't say it was inaccurate either. At first, I thought the attention would fade quickly, the way stories do. A burst of outrage, then on to the next headline. But the story stuck. Maybe it was the simplicity of it. A Purple Heart, a pawn shop, a daughter trying to protect her father's legacy. It resonated. People didn't let it go. And somewhere between those reposts and think pieces, I realized something. There was still more I hadn't said. The truth was, Linda had been erasing my father for years. This wasn't about one selfish act. This was the culmination of dozens of quiet decisions she made to strip away the parts of him that didn't fit her world. The bingo jokes, the way she called the documentaries war porn, her refusal to stand at the funeral. The medals were just the last piece she could control, and I wasn't okay with letting her rewrite his history for good. So I made a decision. I reached out to a journalist named Mark Lopez. He'd done a series on military families a few years back, and his reporting had always been thoughtful, detailed, but not sensational. I sent a short email first, introduced myself, told him my father's name, his unit, the awards. I included a photo of the shadow box. I mentioned the pawn shop, the listing, the initial story. Then I added a sentence I hadn't said out loud to anyone else yet. "I believe my father's memory is being exploited by someone who never respected his service, and I'm done being quiet about it." He responded the same afternoon, said he wanted to talk. We met at a coffee shop downtown. I brought a folder filled with old family photos, emails I'd exchanged with Linda over the years, even text messages from neighbors who had seen her showing off new jewelry weeks after my father died. I wasn't trying to smear her. I just wanted the context to be clear. She didn't act out of grief. She acted out of convenience. Mark listened carefully, took notes, asked permission before recording. He never pushed. When I showed him the pawn shop listing, he winced. $50 for a Purple Heart, he said quietly. That's not just careless, that's deliberate. 3 days later, the story aired. The headline read, "Purple Heart sold for $50 by veteran's widow." This time, it wasn't just a short feature. It was a full segment, complete with photos of my dad, quotes from his commanding officer, even an interview with one of his old unit members who had seen the story online and contacted the station himself. I hadn't expected that part. But there he was, sitting in front of a flag backdrop, talking about the time my father dragged him out of a burning Humvee during an ambush in Mosul. "He saved my life," the man said. And someone treated his memory like it was trash. I watched the piece twice, then shut my laptop. The next morning, Linda called. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. "You need to fix this." I didn't respond right away. "You told them everything," she snapped. "That reporter had our address. Do you know how many calls I've gotten in the last 24 hours? People are leaving messages on my car. Someone threw a rock through my window." Her voice wasn't shaky, it was furious. "I didn't give them your name," I said calmly, "or your address." "Don't play dumb," she spat. "You think the internet can't put two and two together? You made me look like a monster." I waited a beat, then said, "You did that yourself." She fell silent. For a long second, all I heard was her breathing, sharp and uneven. "I've lost friends over this," she said finally. "The VFW doesn't want me volunteering anymore. The church asked me to take a step back from the hospitality committee." I said nothing. "You don't understand," she continued. "I gave up everything for your father. I took care of him when his back gave out. I sat through every damn appointment and pharmacy run, and this is how you repay me." "You didn't give up anything," I said. "You took everything." "That's not fair," she shot back. "You weren't here, you don't know what it was like watching him fade. The pain, the nightmares, you got the nice versions of him, I got the rest. And you sold the best part." It hung there between us. She tried to pivot. "What do you want from me? An apology?" "I want you to stop pretending you respected him, that's all." "I did respect him." "No," I said, "you tolerated him, there's a difference." She started to say something else, but I ended the call. I didn't block her. I didn't delete her number. But I didn't plan on answering again either. Later that day, I received an email from a veterans organization. They'd seen the story and wanted permission to feature my dad on their memorial page. They were starting a campaign around proper handling of military honors. They asked if they could use his image. I said yes. The next week, someone started a fundraiser online, Honor Not for Sale, with the goal of buying back-pawned or auctioned medals and returning them to surviving families. I didn't start it, but they listed my dad as the story's catalyst. Donations poured in. Messages, too, some from daughters like me, others from strangers who just wanted to say they were sorry. Linda's name never came up directly, but she was everywhere between the lines. In the comments, the headlines, the quiet shame that attached itself to her actions like static. I didn't gloat, I didn't post about it. But I watched it all unfold from a distance, finally understanding what Erica meant. This wasn't revenge, it was clarity. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. The bingo hall was the first to act. I heard about it through a neighbor, Marlene, the same woman who called me about Linda's new jewelry months earlier. She caught me up while I was back in town for a weekend. We were in line at a sandwich shop when she leaned in and said, "I guess Linda won't be winning any more Tuesday jackpots." I looked at her confused. "What do you mean?" "She's banned," Marlene said, like it was common knowledge. "Word is, management didn't want the attention. She caused too much of a stir." I didn't press for details. I didn't have to. The story had gained traction far beyond what I expected. Linda's photo hadn't been published, but people talk. And in a place like that, where regulars guard their tables like territory and gossip moves faster than the ink on a bingo sheet, it didn't take much for her to become persona non grata. She tried to get back in, apparently, claimed it was all a misunderstanding, but nobody was interested in hearing her side. A week later, she posted a rant on Facebook, public, written in bold, all-caps font, like she was trying to shout through the screen. It started with "some people will do anything for attention" and ended with a vague Bible quote about false witnesses. She didn't name me, but it was obvious. Half her friends commented with heart emojis and vague encouragements. The other half said nothing. A few even unfriended her, according to Erica, who couldn't help but keep tabs. I didn't respond. I didn't engage, not once. At first, that took effort. It's easy to say you're above it until someone paints you as the villain in your own story. But every time I opened my phone, ready to type something, just one post, one paragraph to set the record straight, I stopped myself. Because the truth was already out, people had seen it, and more importantly, I knew it, that was enough. Her church quietly asked her to step back from the hospitality committee. No public explanation, just a private phone call and a revised volunteer schedule that no longer included her name. She tried to save face, told people she was taking time to recenter, whatever that meant, but even that didn't stick. The church newsletter came out the following month without a single mention of her, not even a birthday shout-out. I heard from a few locals that she'd started shopping in the next town over, said she couldn't go to the grocery store without getting looks, said people were whispering behind her back. Whether or not that was true, I don't know, but the perception alone was enough to rattle her. The pawn shop returned the medals without fanfare. No receipt, no charge, just a plain brown box handed over the counter. The clerk didn't make eye contact. I thanked him. He didn't respond. I kept the box closed for a week, not out of fear or resentment, just a quiet need to process everything. When I finally opened it, the medals were arranged the way I remembered, tucked neatly into the shadow box with the flag still folded and the photo untouched. A little smudged, maybe, but intact. I hung it in my apartment, across from my desk. No spotlight, no frame lighting, just a quiet reminder. Linda's posts continued for a while. She went through phases: indignation, victimhood, self-righteous forgiveness. One week she was asking for prayers. The next she was hinting at legal action. A friend forwarded me a screenshot where she said I'd stolen family property. I laughed when I read it. There was no family property. My father's medals were never hers to sell. Eventually, the posts stopped. People stopped engaging. The silence did what reason never could. I went back to work. I took on a new project. I went out with friends again. The story stopped following me, at least in the public sense, but I knew it was still living in Linda's shadow. Erica told me she saw her at a community yard sale a month later. Alone, sitting behind a folding table with knickknacks no one seemed to want. She looked tired, Erica said, worn out in a way that had nothing to do with age. She saw me, Erica said, didn't say anything, just looked down and started folding sweaters. I asked how she looked, not out of concern, just curiosity. Like someone who knows the room has changed. That made sense. There was no big confrontation, no final scene, just a slow retreat. Linda started showing up less, at events, online, in conversations. I got the sense she expected me to reach out eventually, to smooth it over. That had always been my role, growing up. The one who kept things polite, even when they were uncomfortable. The one who called first. But I didn't. Because I had nothing else to say. I spent that spring reordering things. Not physically, emotionally. There's something strange about realizing that justice doesn't always look like a courtroom or an apology. Sometimes it's just watching someone come undone by their own behavior. She didn't lose everything. She still had the house, her car, her bank account. But she lost the thing she valued most, the appearance of being respected. She liked being seen as the doting widow, the social woman with connections and routines. And now, people looked through her instead of at her. A friend of hers tried reaching out once, sent me a long email about how grief can make people act irrationally, how I should show compassion, how Linda wasn't a bad person, just overwhelmed. I read it once, then deleted it. I didn't need someone to translate her motives. I had lived through them. And the longer I stayed quiet, the more peace I found. There's a strange kind of freedom in letting go of the need to be understood, to explain yourself, to win the argument. The people who mattered already knew, the ones who didn't never would. Linda faded from view that year. No more Facebook rants, no surprise phone calls, just a slow, inevitable slide into the background. The kind you don't notice until you realize you haven't thought about the person in weeks. I let it happen, not out of cruelty. Just because I was done holding space for someone who never held any for me or for my father. And that was enough. The card came in mid-October. No return address on the envelope, but the handwriting was unmistakably hers, rounded, dramatic loops, like she was trying to make the words look cheerful even when they were. Inside was a store-bought card, beige with a soft watercolor painting of a bird on a branch. No note, just a Bible verse written in blue ink across the blank side. Be kind and compassionate to one another, forgiving each other, just as in Christ God forgave you. No dear, no love, No explanation, no apology. I read it once and slid it back into the envelope. Then I placed it in the drawer where I keep spare chargers and paperwork I should probably sort through. I didn't throw it away. I didn't display it either. It wasn't sentimental. It was an acknowledgement of something, though I'm still not sure what. That was the first time I heard from her in almost 4 months. By then, the noise around the story had quieted. The news cycle had moved on. The fundraiser slowed down. The comments stopped coming, but the impact lingered. Not in the headlines, just in the way people looked at her now. Less curious, more cautious. Thanksgiving that year was at my cousin Nadine's place. A small gathering, just family and a few of Nadine's friends from church. I hadn't expected Linda to show up. She never used to go when my dad was alive. Said the food was too bland and the conversation too long. But when I walked into the living room, there she was, standing near the fireplace, holding a glass of wine and making small talk with one of Nadine's in-laws. She looked thinner, maybe just tired. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and she was wearing a necklace I didn't recognize. Something understated for once. We locked eyes for a moment. I nodded once. She returned it barely. That was the extent of it for most of the evening. Later, while I was helping in the kitchen, she approached me. She didn't say hello. She didn't make a joke. Just hovered near the sink while I rinsed dishes. "How's work?" she asked, like it was a normal question, like we were two people with an intact history. "It's steady," I said. "We just wrapped up a project last week." She nodded. "That's good." A pause. "I saw the billboard on I-85, she added. "The one with the Veterans Campaign. They used your dad's photo, didn't they?" "They did." Another pause. "He would have liked that," she said. Not quite a compliment, more of a statement she hoped would land well. I didn't respond. I handed her a towel for the plates. We worked in silence after that. She didn't push. I didn't invite conversation. When we were done, she left the kitchen without saying goodbye. I didn't feel triumphant, just clear. This is what it would be now. Polite exchanges in rooms with other people. She'd ask about work. I'd answer without detail. She might try again later with another card, another neutral comment, but I wasn't giving more than that. I'd set the terms. And she understood. Over the next year, I saw her twice, both at family functions. Once at a baby shower, once at a graduation party. Each time, we nodded, exchanged a few words, nothing heavy. She stopped trying to steer the conversation toward emotion. She didn't bring up the past. She didn't ask about the medals. I think she knew better. I don't forgive her. At least, not in the way people want that word to mean. I don't feel peace when I think of her. I don't hope we'll one day rebuild some version of closeness. But I also don't feel fire anymore. That's its own kind of relief. What I feel is boundary, structure. A framework that lets me walk into a room and not dread the interaction. Because now I know how to manage it. I know where it ends. She doesn't get access to my grief anymore, or my memories, or my dad. And that's not cruel, it's careful. People like to push for reconciliation. They want the movie ending, the handshake, the tearful hug. But the truth is, not every wound closes clean, some just stop bleeding. That's what this is. I keep the card, not because I treasure it, but because it reminds me of the distance. Of how far things had to fall for her to reach for a verse instead of an apology. And how far I've come by not reaching back. It's been 3 years. The story isn't fresh anymore. The outrage has cooled, the comments have slowed, and most of the people who followed the headlines have long since moved on. But for me, the ending didn't come with a single event. It came gradually over time, in small decisions, in quiet changes. I had the medals reframed that first winter. Took them to a local veteran-run shop. I told the man there what had happened, not the whole thing, just enough for him to understand why I wanted it done right this time. He nodded, didn't ask questions, just promised to treat them with care. When I picked them up 2 weeks later, they looked the same, but somehow different. The glass was thicker, the backing a deeper blue, and at the bottom, a small brass plaque with one simple line, "For a life of service and integrity." I hung the frame in my home office, not as decoration, as anchor. It sits across from my desk in the line of sight when I look up from my work, a quiet presence. Clean, respected, intact. Sometimes I catch myself glancing at it in the middle of a long workday, or when I'm stuck in a stretch of writing that won't cooperate. It doesn't make me sentimental. It just steadies me. My father was many things: a medic, a stubborn man, a tired one by the end. But above all, he lived with a kind of quiet discipline that doesn't show up in headlines or speeches. He never demanded reverence, but he earned it. Linda still lives in the same house. I hear things occasionally. Through Marlene mostly. She keeps to herself now. Doesn't go to church much, doesn't show up to neighborhood events, orders her groceries online, pays someone to mow the lawn. No one's sure if it's shame or just fatigue, but either way, she's become a footnote. Someone told me she tried attending a different bingo hall a few towns over, but word followed her there too. She stopped going after a couple of months. I don't feel triumphant when I hear those things. I don't celebrate her isolation. That was never the goal. I didn't want to ruin her. I just wanted her to stop pretending she could revise the man who raised me. To stop acting like his life was some prop she could box up and sell off when it got inconvenient. And the truth is, public shame did what private outrage never could. She didn't hear me when I spoke directly, but she couldn't ignore a story that made its way across television screens and timelines. The world spoke louder than I ever could. She's never tried to rebuild anything since that card. No second note, no voicemail, not even a forwarded meme pretending to break the ice. I'm okay with that. There's nothing else to sort out. People ask sometimes, usually quietly, often in the form of, "Do you ever talk to her?" And I answer honestly, "Not really." That's usually enough. Occasionally, someone tries to offer a gentle nudge toward forgiveness. "You know," they'll say, "time softens things." But they're misunderstanding the point. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not holding onto a grudge like it's a badge of honor. I just don't believe in handing someone back the access they abused. There's a difference between healing and reconciliation. I chose healing. She never earned the rest. Erica visited last month. We were sitting in my living room when she looked over at the shadow box and said, "I'm glad you fought for that." I told her I didn't feel like I fought. I just stopped making myself small. She smiled, "Same thing sometimes." I think about that a lot. How often women are told to make peace by shrinking, to be understanding, patient, non-confrontational. It's not that I wanted conflict. I avoided it for years. But at some point, silence became complicity. And the only way to protect my father's memory was to speak louder than my discomfort. Now I live in a way that feels aligned. I don't apologize for setting limits. I don't feel responsible for how other people carry their shame. I do my job. I spend time with people who knew my dad and still talk about him with affection, not revision. I keep a few of his books, dog-eared and underlined, on a shelf near my reading chair. They still smell faintly like the house we used to share. His medals are safe, his name is respected, and his story, the real one, is preserved. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with a gavel or a confrontation. Sometimes it shows up in a quiet TV segment and 1,200 Facebook comments. Not because the internet cares deeply about nuance, but because people recognize disrespect when they see it. It didn't fix everything, but it changed enough. The woman who tried to erase him now lives in a town where people remember what she did. And I live in a home where he's remembered for who he was. That's the legacy I get to carry forward. Not hers, his. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet or gone public like I did? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever had to protect someone's legacy or set a boundary that cost you a relationship, share your story. Someone out there needs to hear it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss more true stories about standing up, speaking out, and honoring what matters.